Welcome everybody to the January 25th, 2022 meeting for the Salem Planning Commission. I'm calling it to order, but first on the list is election of president and vice president. Commissioner Slater, do you have a motion?
I do have a motion. I am very pleased to nominate Commissioner Griggs for yet another term as commission president.
Thank you. Do I have a second on that?
Second by Levine.
Second by Levine. Discussion on the motion? Shelby, will you please call the roll, signify by saying aye if you're in favor of that motion to elect me again as president.
Commissioner Goebel?
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs?
Aye.
Commissioner Heller?
Aye.
Commissioner Kopcho?
Is he on yet?
He is. It might still be connecting to microphone. I'll skip and come back. Commissioner Levine?
Aye.
Commissioner Slater?
Aye.
And Commissioner Kopcho. It might have kicked him out. And then Augustine is absent, so I will just put Kopcho absent for this and check on him when he gets in.
Okay. Now we're looking for a motion for vice president. Commissioner Levine, do you have a motion that might have to do with somebody else on that commission?
I would make a motion if it pleases the commission that I nominate myself as vice president.
Okay. Do we have a second? I'll second it for discussion. Discussion on the motion?
Well, I'm glad I at least got a second. The crickets had me worried there.
I didn't know if you were going to be the sacrificial lamb or if it was Slater or if it was Heller, because all of you were very capable. So any other discussion on that motion? Okay. Will you please? Yep.
I'm sorry, this is Commissioner Kopcho. I was trying to raise my hand, but I didn't, I guess.
Yeah, I don't even see your name. Yeah, your hand is not raised, but now I can hear you. So go ahead, Commissioner Kopcho.
My computer suffered from a communication issue and I dropped and then rejoined after the motion was seconded, but I don't know the motion that we are discussing.
The current motion under discussion is vice president, and the motion is for Commissioner Levine to be vice president. Thank
you. That is an important piece of information.
Yeah, so you know who you're voting on, right? Okay. Any other discussion on that motion? Shelby, will you please call the roll and signify by aye? Signify by saying aye if you're in favor of the motion, nay if you're opposed.
Commissioner Goebel?
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs?
Aye.
Commissioner Heller?
Aye.
Commissioner Kopcho?
Aye.
Commissioner Levine?
Aye.
And Commissioner Slater?
Aye.
And Augustine is absent.
Thank you. Going on down to public comment, we don't have anybody signed up for public comment at this point for items not on the agenda. We'll move to item 4, the consent calendar. I would like to pull item 4.3. So I will look to Commissioner Levine for a motion on 4.1 and 4.2 as items under the consent calendar. You have a motion.
Sorry, I know consent calendar 4.1. I would make a motion to approve the draft minutes from the December 21st, 2021 Planning Commission hearing and enter those into the record.
Perfect. Do I have a second?
I'll second. Heller.
Thank you, Commissioner Heller. Discussion on the motion. Shelby, will you please call the roll, signify by saying aye if you're in favor of the motion to approve the December 21st minutes.
Commissioner Goebel?
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs?
Aye.
Commissioner Heller?
Aye.
Commissioner Kopcho?
Aye.
Commissioner Levine?
Aye.
and Commissioner Slater.
Abstain, absent.
That's right, because you were not here for the 21st. And you did have a chance to listen to the hearing, the meeting.
I did not.
Perfect. Thank you for making that note. I was a little discombobulated. Moving on, so the motion approved. Item 4.3, I pulled that because in my short history of 5 years on commission, I've never seen a case where the applicant had a disagreement with the facts and findings prepared, usually in consult with the applicant and then reviewed by staff. So I just wanted to have a discussion on as much as we can discuss about that and what are our options. So I don't know, Lisa, if you want to address that, or if that's a Tom Capani question.
Give it a shot. Tom's on here as well. So Lisa Anderson, will be your planning administrator for the record. We have prepared facts and findings for you to support your approval of this application. So of course, the staff recommendation was denial and the planning commission decided approval. And so we went through and changed it to meet that approval and the conditions that were discussed. The applicant has raised that they think there are other things that should be included in there. And that's not what we have presented to you, but maybe I'll let Tom talk about maybe procedurally what can happen and then answer some questions if you have them.
Thank you, Lisa. Tom?
Thank you. Tom Capani, Deputy City Attorney. So the consideration of findings is outside the statutory scheme that's laid out for consideration of land use decisions. And so what that means is that there's no right by the applicant to contest or to present alternative findings if they disagree with them. Their remedy is that they can appeal. That being said, there's nothing that prevents the commission from taking up those objections if it chooses to do so. Probably the best way to handle that would be that you would have to reopen the record for everybody, so that in case any incidental evidence is presented while we're discussing the findings, that we're not running contrary to procedural need. So there's no right by the applicant to challenge the findings as presented. I think that staff consistently writes these findings in other cases regardless of how they go, and I think that the commission can consider what's been presented to them on its own merits and whether it meets the criteria. I'll ask the commission to recall that this case ends up being decided on a relatively narrow basis. The real controversy in this case was whether or not the traffic counts were sufficient and whether or not the intersections would operate with the mitigation provided. And our traffic engineer had a contrary view and presented evidence in that regard. Their traffic engineer presented evidence to the contrary, and ultimately the balance of the evidence was found in favor of the applicant. And so there doesn't need to be a lot of statutory analysis in this circumstance. There wasn't a lot of other controversy. And the question before the commission really was it going to approve a change from RA to CR? Other alternate zones were suggested, but it wouldn't have been within the commission's purview to substitute one of those other zoning options for the CR that was being requested. So it was an up or down question about whether CR, the change to CR met the criteria, and the commission decided accordingly. So it's a relatively narrow issue. We've tailored the findings so that it meets all the criteria and focuses on that narrow subject.
Questions for Mr. Kapani from our commissioners? So I have maybe I'm like the slowest one on this commission, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So when the facts and findings are prepared, they're generally prepared from a narrative given to you by the applicant, correct? And then you sometimes work that.
Not necessarily.
Was that the case in this case?
I think it was a combination of things.
Okay.
I think that we did look at what they suggested. We took some of their suggestions, but rejected quite a bit of other stuff. And so,
yeah, I would say it just to think about it in a different way is that even on cases where we recommend approval and the commission approves them, we may not agree with everything in the applicant's written statement and application, right? So they may say the code is interpreted this way, and we may disagree with that issue, but we still find that they met the criteria and can be approved. So when we write up the decision, we don't necessarily say everything the applicant said is 100% the city's same view, but instead we say, well, they might have said that, okay, but what we're saying is they meet this criteria in this way. And so that's actually really, really, really common when you start reading applicants' statements, and neighbors will call us and say like, why would you say that? And we say, well, that's the applicant statement. We don't agree with that. And so our finding is different, but they still meet the criteria. And so most of the original staff report from Olivia demonstrated how they did meet the criteria. It really came down to the transportation. So a lot of what's in the facts and findings was in the original staff report. And then of course, on final decisions, we address also issues that are raised in the hearing or from components to make sure, or opponents, I should say, to make sure that we address those. So that's what we've done here.
Thank you, Lisa. Commissioner Slater has a question.
Yeah, thank you. So Tom, if we reopen the hearing, what is the scope of the question that we're being asked here? I mean, we're not going to fundamentally change the underlying vote.
Okay, so sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I was rambling at that point. Go ahead.
Okay, so I guess before I'm happy to answer the question, but I think that you haven't had an opportunity to review the hearing in this case, right?
Correct.
Okay, so you're not going to be participating in the decision.
Correct.
Okay, so Lisa, remind me, if someone's not participating in the decision, do they typically participate in the deliberations?
No, but I guess we're not to deliberations yet because there's no motion.
Okay, so you're just asking a question. Okay, fair enough. Remind me what your question was.
What if we open this up, what is the scope of the question that we're being asked?
Well, and that's one of the difficulties of if we present both sets of findings and then you're going through and having to pick and choose, then the difficulty is the practicalities of how do the findings ultimately get written. And so to my mind, one way you could do it would be that you take the findings that have been presented and you determine whether they sufficiently embody what the commission decided. And if there are particular things that you don't think they cover, then you can offer suggestions. And so, and then the staff could come back with those suggestions and with a second draft. That could be one way to do it. Otherwise, what you're committing to is having both documents and having to pick and choose between, well, we like this paragraph, we don't like that paragraph, and the whole committee has to participate in that process. And drafting a document by committee is in an open hearing is often quite difficult. So,
did you have a follow-up, Commissioner Slater?
I don't. Thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Kopani, the facts and findings that are prepared by staff, that condition 3 the language around the traffic mitigation, that's verbatim from the original. Nothing was changed in that, correct? As far as the strategies to, the turn lanes under condition 3, all that is accurate. You can't really talk about it, can you?
Well, I can. When you say taken verbatim.
So is this taken from the staff report, the conditions? Because this was what the
Olivia will
applicant
have to remind
suggested.
me, because we were recommending denial,
Yeah.
did we include the conditions?
There were no conditions because of the denial. The motion said to build what was supposed to be built per the TPR is how
Right.
staff understood it. So those conditions are pulled from the mitigation section of the
Right.
TPR.
Okay, got it. And so you really can't tell us, can you, why they're concerned about the facts and findings without opening the record, correct?
We can have that conversation without opening the record, but the risk you run is that there'll be the introduction of additional evidence that isn't allowed. And so that's why I'm recommending that if you're going to engage in a conversation about what their objections are and why they're objecting, that you reopen the record.
Okay. Other questions for Mr. Kapani or any other staff person? Okay. Commissioner Levine, it goes back to you because it was part of the, do you have a motion under 4.3?
Yes, for point of conversation, I will make a motion that we approve the order case number CPC ZC21-04 for comprehensive plan change and zone change.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second. Gotcha.
Gotcha. Got it. Discussion on the motion. Oh, Commissioner Goebel, are you wanting to discuss?
I want to entertain reopening the public hearing.
Okay, so let's vote. That's a separate motion. So let's see what happens on this one. And then we can get to your motion. Is that correct, Lisa?
You said Lisa, but Tom's on here, so I figured he would say yes. You could make
Yes,
a
that's
subs-
correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you have a motion second, you should deal with that one first.
So the motion, any more discussion on the motion on the table, which is to approve the order?
Yeah, I will speak. This is Commissioner Levine. I made the motion so that for the, let me find a different room here so I don't have commentators
Oh, doesn't bother
in
me.
the background. But I'm going to turn my video off while I teleport to another room. I feel like there is kind of a need to reopen the record to answer this question and be able to give I guess the applicant and staff a fully competent, knowledgeable answer. And I don't know if we can do that without reopening the record. And I know that that's dangerous because this is dragged on for multiple hearings. So, but I'm questioning if it's the right thing to do to ignore the request and to just approve and move on. So I would like to hear what the other commissioners feel about this, but I'm currently leaning towards that, we reopen the record.
Other comments? We're under discussion, so we're all fair game. Part of me just doesn't want to do it because of the can of worms that we possibly could be opening. But then again, I just don't know what the reason is. And it's such a rare thing for this to happen. I would imagine that it's a significant concern for the applicant to bring it this far down the road. Commissioner Kopcho.
Sure. Being the only one, I think, who voted against the initial motion in the last meeting, I would be happy to just have it keep on going through, not to relive, the past trauma. Since we had heard that public case, I did, in the interim, attend a neighborhood association meeting where the applicant was present. So should we open it back up for public record, then I would have to declare an ex parte contact, I think, because they gave a presentation on, us passing that through in the previous. So it would be an additional conversation that I would need to have with our friend Tom here. So just to point a note, but I think that opening it back up to let folks say their piece, I have no issue with that.
Okay. Commissioner Heller, how are you doing?
Well, I'll be the lone objector. I think we should just go ahead and vote on the findings. And I don't support reopening the hearing. I think that whatever was supposedly left out has to be rather minor, or it would have, come up in the hearing itself. So I'm going to vote no on reopening.
Thank you for sharing that. And Commissioner Goble, did you want to speak on this motion? I know you have interest in a different one, but didn't want to leave you out.
So I apologize. Is this, if I have concerns with the findings themselves, is this the time to voice that?
Well, this is the discussion on whether we should, well, I suppose it is, because you can discuss anything that's pertinent to the current motion, which is to approve the order.
Okay, so unrelated to whether or not we decide to reopen the hearing, which I think may have its merits, just because we disagreed with staff findings, that the applicant, I don't think maybe had the opportunity to rebut these exact findings, and so I think it would be prudent to give them the opportunity to provide comment on that. But then unrelated to that, I did have a question or a clarification regarding condition 2, where it says the subject property shall have no single retail store building that is constructed with more than 70,000 square feet. And it doesn't clarify whether that's the footprint or the total floor area for a multi-story building. And that was my only point of clarification at this time.
Okay, thank you. And we're under deliberation, so we're not asking staff at this point. Other comments on the motion on the table? Seeing no more, and with just so very few commissioners, Shelby, will you please call the roll? Signify by saying aye if you are in favor of the motion, which is to approve the order, or nay if you are opposed.
Commissioner Goble? Oh,
I apologize. So if we approve this, we're not giving them the opportunity to reopen the hearing?
Correct.
Then I'll vote no.
okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Griggs?
No.
Commissioner Heller?
Yes.
Commissioner Kopcho?
No.
Commissioner Levine?
No.
And Commissioner Slater is abstaining?
Correct.
Okay, that's 4 no's and 1 yes.
The motion did not pass. I'll turn it over to you, Commissioner Goble, for your motion.
Thank you. And I apologize. I think I'm the slowest one on the commission. So I would like to make a motion to reopen the public hearing for comprehensive plan change, zone change case number CPC ZC 2104 to allow for further testimony in public hearing.
I have a second.
Second by Levine.
Thank you, Levine. Discussion on the motion. You want to speak to your motion, Commissioner Goble?
Yeah, I think.
Okay, oh, Lisa, hold on just a second, because Lisa's telling me I'm doing something wrong.
I'm just asking for clarity. Was the request not to open the written record? The motion was to reopen the hearing.
I think
I'm
the
just wondering, are you taking new testimony, verbal testimony from everybody? Is that the motion? Is that what we were saying, Tom? Or is it written, or?
I think it's a record open, right? Like we would sometimes not close the hearing, but keep the record open. Is that what you're, because that gives you time to align the facts and findings, correct?
Well, we're not going to align anything. We're going to give you ours that you already have. We're going to give you the applicants. And at the next meeting, you will either be writing by commission the 30 pages, or you will pick one, I guess, will be your options at that point. So, and I think then the applicant would speak to it, the applicant's representative. I'm just looking for clarity from Tom.
Well, I mean, it depends on what you want to do. If you want to open it up to completely open the record, you can do so. Probably just opening the written record is sufficient. And so it depends on what you want.
So Commissioner Goebel, is your motion to open up the written record?
Yes, ma'am. Just to open the written record, please.
Okay. And a second was Levine. And so we're discussing that motion. Any thoughts on that?
Yes. Okay. So my idea behind reopening the written record for the applicant to provide testimony is similar as to what I said before. I think that because these findings are different than what staff originally had and what we originally discussed during the prior public hearing, I think that it's prudent to allow the applicant to provide their thoughts on these new findings, new conditions, and because they didn't have an opportunity to speak to this particular information at the prior hearing.
Any other discussion? And it sounds like we'll have our work cut out for us as a commission to review the two sets and see where we think the changes should be made, if any at all. So be prepared to read, you people, 30 pages. Any more discussion on this motion? Shelby, would you please call the roll, signify by saying aye if you're in favor of the motion, which is to reopen the record, and nay if you're opposed.
Commissioner Goebel?
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs?
Aye.
Commissioner Heller?
No.
Commissioner Kopcho?
Aye.
Commissioner Levine?
Aye.
And Slater abstains, and Augustine is absent.
Thank you, Shelby. Motion passes. Moving on to the public hearings. First of all, are there any ex parte contacts or conflicts, either actual or potential conflicts of interest, that you'd like to declare before we open this hearing? Seeing none, I will open a hearing on CPC ZC 21-06 for the 2100 block of Dokes Ferry Road, which is in Ward 8. Shelby, would you please read the statement of criteria?
This is a public hearing to consider a comprehensive plan change, neighborhood plan change, and zone change, case number CPC ZC 21-06 for a property located on the 2100 block of Dokes Ferry Road Northwest. The criteria applicable to this application are found in the Salem Revised Code, SRC, chapters 64.025 E2 for comprehensive plan map amendments and 265.005 E1 for quasi-judicial zone changes. Failure to raise an issue prior to the close of the public hearing with statements or evidence sufficient to afford the Planning Commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony. The Planning Commission will then either continue the public hearing or leave the record open for at least 7 days.
Thank you, Shelby. So Ms. Donaldson, this is your first case in front of Planning Commission. You picked a doozy, didn't you?
Yes.
Were you late to the staff meeting and that's how you got it?
I just decided to jump in.
There you go. Well, you can go ahead with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just share my screen. Okay, good evening, commissioners. I'm Jamie Donaldson with the Planning Division, presenting before you tonight the comprehensive plan change and zone change case for the 2100 block of Dokes Ferry Road Northwest. I request that the staff report and its attachments, this presentation, and all additional comments received after the date of the staff report be entered into the record. The subject property is located in West Salem, north of Glen Creek Road, shown here on the larger vicinity map. The property abuts Orchard Heights Road Northwest to the south, a minor arterial street shown in blue, Dokes Ferry Road Northwest to the east, a major arterial shown in pink, and Landegard Drive Northwest designated as a collector street in orange, dead ends into the property on the west side. The subject property is approximately 36.86 acres in size, is currently vacant, and contains a parcel of land solely within its boundary housing a single-family residence, which is not a part of this proposal. The Salem Area Comprehensive Plan map designates the subject property as developing residential shown in green and mixed use shown in pink. The proposal includes changing the northern portion of the property's comprehensive plan designation from developing residential and approximately a 2-acre portion of mixed use designation to multifamily residential. The majority of surrounding properties are also designated developing residential in green. To the south, there's land designated as community service education in blue. And to the north is land under Polk County's comprehensive plan as urban reserve, also designated developing residential in the Salem Area Comprehensive Plan. The subject property is split zoned RA residential agriculture shown in green and NCMU neighborhood center mixed use shown in brown. The proposal includes changing the property's RA zoned portion, approximately 22.84 acres, an additional 2 acres of the NCMU portion to the RM2 multifamily residential zone for a total of 24.84 acres. Again, the majority of surrounding properties are designated as RA in green, with land to the south designated as PE, public and private education services in blue, and Polk County suburban residential zone to the north. A larger aerial picture here shows the proximity of the property to 4 schools covering all 3 school levels, high school, middle school, and 2 elementary schools. The West Salem Neighborhood Association submitted comments with concerns regarding the TPR analysis, which are attached in full to the staff report. The TPR analysis takes into consideration the existing zoning in the vicinity and the effect of the proposed zone. The Assistant City Traffic Engineer concurs with the TPR analysis findings and has recommended a condition to limit development to a maximum of 500 multifamily units and a cumulative total of 2,270 average daily vehicle trips to mitigate impacts. Prior to the staff report, 22 comments were received from neighboring property owners or residents regarding a variety of concerns about how the site would be developed. Since the report was published, an additional 11 comments were received, including a response from the applicant's traffic engineer regarding the TPR analysis and support of the findings provided from the Housing Land Advocates and the Fair Housing Council of Oregon. The applicant is applying for a minor comprehensive plan map amendment and zone change, which does not include specific plans for development at this time. Any future development proposal will be reviewed separately and notice will be sent to the property owners and tenants within 250 feet of the subject property. The city's fire and building and safety departments have indicated no concerns with the proposed comp plan zone change. The Public Works Department, Chariot, and the Salem Kaiser School District have indicated public utilities and services and civic infrastructure providing connectivity to schools via roads, sidewalks, and bike lanes, as well as an additional bus stop can be provided at the time of future development. The applicant has provided findings attached in your staff reports, which indicate that the site is better suited as a multifamily use due to its proximity to a high school, middle school, and elementary schools, as well as major and minor arterials and a collector street. The TPR analysis provided indicates the proposal will have no significant impact to the city's transportation system with a trip cap condition in place as recommended. In addition, the housing needs analysis identified a deficit of capacity in the multifamily designation of 2,897 dwelling units and a 207 gross acres of residential land. Within multiple family residential designation, the subject property can be developed as multifamily dwellings, maximizing the density while helping to meet housing needs within Salem's urban growth boundary and reducing the deficit identified in the HNA. Lastly, the Our Salem project has proposed a similar change to the zoning map designation for the southern portion of the property from NCMU to mixed use 2, which is consistent with the existing comprehensive plan designation of mixed use for that portion, as well as propose a change to the zoning map designation for the northern portion of the property from RA to RM2, multiple family residential, which is consistent with the applicant's proposal. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the application with conditions of approval as outlined in the staff report. That concludes this presentation, and I am available to help answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Donaldson. Questions from commissioners? If you could raise your hand, that would be helpful. While they're warming up for you, I have a question. Was there consideration, oh, Commissioner Levine, you go ahead. I'll go after you.
No, please, you go first. I'll go second.
Okay. Was there any consideration or conversation around potentially this site being zoned RM1 as opposed to RM2? And my second follow-up, so you can be gnawing on this one, is what would the maximum number of units be if it was fully built out under RM1? I know it's like double the amount of units than RM2, correct? Or half the number of units per acre.
Right, I did the calculation. It would be 347 units in an RM1 zone. The applicant has proposed RM2 and indicated that they would do a maximum of 500 dwelling units, which correlates with the trip cap as well.
I'll wait and ask the applicant then in a minute. Commissioner Levine.
I guess a question about process related to future development. I don't think anyone's ever asked, but let's assume that the reasoning behind the trip cap is to mitigate the traffic, which is a constant topic of concern for West Salem residents. And so if there was a development, like an extra roadway in the future that alleviated traffic to where, like, if a new traffic study was done, then the intersections surrounding this development would not have, let's say, such a low grade, the D and the F that we see in the traffic study. If they were improved, is there any process for a developer to then go back to the city and get like a trip cap removed from the property?
I'm gonna defer to maybe traffic or Lisa on this one. I'm not sure on that.
Lisa, you want to take that? Or
I see Olivia's ready to go. So
Or Olivia.
I was gonna ask Tony that question.
Oh,
but my
say
guess is
Tony is
that
here.
as a condition of approval of a comprehensive plan, they would have to take a variance, if I'm correct, Lisa, to that condition of approval. So it runs with the land. So there would be a whole new evaluation
Yes.
done, and traffic would weigh in again, and a public hearing would be held.
So there is a land use process that they could do that analysis and show that the trip cap's no longer needed, and they would need to, it's either a zone change or a variance depending on to remove that condition.
Mhm.
I've never
question.
seen anyone do that. Maybe Tony has, but I've never seen that happen.
well, we've had a few firsts tonight,
Yeah.
Commissioner Heller.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My question is about the wetlands. Apparently on the property, there are some wetlands. Is that correct?
Those haven't been analyzed at this point. They will be reviewed at the time of development. I think there is a creek that that ends to the property, but I don't know about the wetlands being a part of the property.
So how does that work? How does that process work? If we were to say we were to approve this, what would happen then as far as the wetlands were concerned? Does it come back for approval or does it go somewhere else? What's the process, please?
So when there's future plans of development submitted, they would review the wetlands and landside hazards then, and that would affect how their development plans are proposed. That goes out to noticing. Sorry, my lights are. That goes out to noticing as well. So that's just reviewed with site plan or whatever multifamily being reviewed at that time.
Olivia, did you want to add anything? I see your picture.
I mean, I just went and looked at the delineated, what we have as the adopted maps for the wetland. It does look like there is a wetland that does, or a creek that comes through the property, but it's south of where the proposed zone change is. It's part of the subject property, but not part of the area in question for the zone change.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Did you have any other follow-ups on that one?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. Other questions from commissioners at this time? Commissioner Goebel.
I would just like to hear potentially what, so if this was built out to maximum density, what improvements to those streets in that intersection would potentially or practically be required?
And that's more of a, that's more of a later conversation during the site plan development review that we'll have, but Ms. Donaldson, you feel free to add whatever you would like, but I know that that's going to be a down the road conversation that we would have if this is approved.
Yeah, typically that is down the road. I will say though that the applicant has provided that they won't build out to maximum density. 500 units is below the maximum that would be allowed on that property. But it would involve street improvements, sidewalks, the like. So it's kind of reviewed when there's plans proposed.
Did you have a follow-up, Commissioner Goebel?
No, that's fine.
Okay. And I know that one of the pieces of testimony that we had, written testimony, was by anyway, he spoke to the traffic calming that they would like to see so that there's not that jumping with the cars. And so all of that would be at a later date because they would have to mitigate to a degree the impact for that. Other questions for Ms. Donaldson before we move on to the applicant? We'll have another opportunity to ask you questions. So we'll move on to the applicant with either John Ill or Mark, if you want to. I'm not sure who's going to present first, but whoever is speaking, if they could state their name and address for the record, and you have a total of 15 minutes.
Hi, my name is John Eld, address 5722 Joynack Street, South Salem. I'm with Titan Hill LLC, and I'm here with members of my team. I have Mark Lowen, also with Titan Hill LLC, Natalie Janey with Multitech Engineering, Joe Bestman with Transite Consulting, and Alan Soren with Sawfield Griggs. We're a local company based out of Salem, and we develop a mix of housing options. We've developed single-family residential, senior housing, and are currently working on several multifamily developments throughout the city. We live in this city, we care about this city, and we've done a lot and will continue to do a lot to bring a mix of housing to the residents of the city. Tonight, we've proposed a zone change for the 2100 block of Dokes Ferry. It includes a request to rezone a portion of the property from residential agriculture and neighborhood commercial mixed use to a multifamily residential. I would like to thank staff and all the hard work that they've put forth as we move through this process and their extremely thorough staff report that they provided. After reading through the public comment letters, we feel staff has done an excellent job in responding to resident concerns in their report. We also recognize that a majority of the comments pertain to the development itself, which is not currently part of this hearing. We appreciate all of this feedback. We continue to welcome further feedback as this project moves forward through site plan and design review. This feedback will be taken very seriously and incorporated in the final design as practical. One comment that I would like to call attention to is the letter from Chariots. We very much appreciate their letter of support. We agree that providing a bus shelter conveniently located to the future project would be extremely beneficial for everyone. Allowing for future residents access to public transportation is critical in helping address the traffic concerns that are common among residents of West Salem. Again, I would like to thank staff for all of their hard work and appreciate the recommendation of approval. We would like to request a small change be made to the condition of approval. We would ask that a parenthetical be added stating that the 2,270 trips calculated at a rate of 4.54 trips per multifamily unit. We provided this language in the supplemental traffic memo that was provided earlier today. Since we deal primarily in unit counts, we just want to ensure that any future review of the TIA is reviewed in context of this report and its intent, which is a 500 unit cap. This small change will ensure that there's a certain level of consistency and transparency as we move through this process. If there's any other specific questions that the commission would like my team to address, we'd be happy to answer those questions. And then I was going to cede the rest of my time to my traffic engineer because I know traffic is a major concern. But if we want to stop and answer questions, I'm happy to do that at this point.
Well, why don't you keep on using your time up until 6:29 and then we can ask questions.
Okay. All right. Perfect. So then I will hand it over to Joe, who's my traffic engineer.
Okay.
Good evening, commissioners. For the record, Joe Bestman, traffic engineer with Transite Consulting based in Bend, Oregon. Really appreciate the comments from staff and all the coordination
Mr.
as well.
Bestman, could you give us your address too for the record? I
61
always get in trouble when I don't ask that.
61271 Splendor Lane, Bend, Oregon 97702.
Thank you.
Yes. So what I wanted to add here real quickly is the public comments were very thoughtful, very well researched. Really appreciate the thoughtful feedback. I do want to say that it's difficult to understand the difference between a transportation planning rule analysis, where it's this comparison of hypothetical development scenarios that no one's even proposing, to what you typically see in a transportation impact analysis, where we're really trying to solve real problems. And so I do want to just make that point that we recognize the concerns and the comments raised by the public. And as John just mentioned, we do plan to incorporate those elements into our study. In looking at the comments, there were a number of concerns raised about land guard and really understanding how a collector going through some of these rural lands is going to function. And again, I think in a site plan application process, we can work closely with staff, looking at different connections, different measures to try and mitigate some of those impacts. For TPR purposes, it's an identified collector in an adopted transportation system plan, and our plan is to remain consistent with that designation. Number of really technical questions, and I did my best to outline those in a lot of detail in a written response that was submitted this afternoon. And I'm hoping that by doing so, we don't have to go through some of those numbers on a Zoom call, for your benefit and mine. Just want to quickly highlight that the study that was prepared is very technical. There's reasonable worst case, there's maximum worst case, there's trip cap scenarios. And again, I really appreciate the thoughtful comments from WISNA and members of the public. I've gone through those in detail. Tony Martin, the city traffic engineer, has gone through those. ODOT's gone through those. And we agree with the staff report. And hopefully the details that I've provided will help alleviate some of those concerns about the traffic study not being done in a certain way or to a correct standard. The one comment I do want to point out, which is a change to my traffic study, is when we looked at this area, we collected counts in 2020 throughout our study area, and we collected those counts again in 2021 just to make sure that nothing changed and things were still reasonable. Well, something did change, not just COVID, but all the school start and end times. And that change from the Salem Kaiser School District was a very substantial change, especially when you're surrounded by 2 elementary schools, a middle and a high school. And so because of that change, we did use the 2021 data in looking at all of our forecasts. And I had written that in the report, but then I highlighted a table wrong. So I just wanted to point that out to the Planning Commission, that we did so very intentionally, just to correctly highlight those new school schedules. But in general, what we see from this whole transportation planning rule is the rezone has the potential to increase trips. and there is existing congestion on Wallace Road. And with our trip cap, we can fully mitigate those impacts and not have a finding of significant impact. So I'm happy to answer questions, and I'll go ahead and end it right there unless John has anything else to add.
John, did you have anything else you want to add? Or we can open it. You ready for questions?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So commissioners, do you raise your hand if you've got a question for either Mr. Bestman or Mr. Eld? And that report, Mr. Bestman, came in a little late this afternoon. Will the neighbors get a chance somehow? Is that shared with them so they can see your detailed response? Because it was a very good document, but I'm hoping that that's going to be shared by staff so the public can see those comments. No hands from for the applicant.
It's my understanding that was made part of the public record by Jamie this afternoon. So I believe that will be available, and I do hope they can download and review that.
Got it. That would be helpful. Okay, seeing no questions for the applicant, we will move on to the Neighborhood Association. I believe, Mr. Anderson, you're here to talk on behalf of the Neighborhood Association, and you have 10 minutes, and name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, or as I say, good evening. And Steve Anderson, West Salem Neighborhood Association Land Use Chair, 3240 Giller Road Northwest. Issue in the neighborhood. There's been a couple questions just to kind of outline the problem. As a neighborhood association, we said we're not opposed to development at this site. We don't oppose multifamily. We do think the RM2 zone at this property is, in essence, a significant impact. We provided a significant analysis in that we provided comments to staff. We included 5 major code areas for consideration, 4 policy areas, and a detailed analysis of the traffic report that we said basically our conclusion is the RM2 zone and the density proposed for the current 500 trip cap is inappropriate. Given the information from the applicant, we believe that it's appropriate to have this record kept open for additional comments, in that goes to one of the major issues here. We have a goal 1 procedural error in this matter, in that the comments were due on January 13th. In Appendix D, the staff report for traffic was presented on January 13th. There was no opportunity, in that was a vacation weekend. I called the traffic engineer on Friday. He was out for the holiday. And then on the 18th, the staff report was issued. So those substantive issues that we brought up in our testimony did not get addressed by city staff. Their staff report says it does, but how can they do that in less than 8 hours is very impractical. So we believe there's a major goal 1 issue then, that the community provided comments, but those comments were not addressed and we were excluded from part of participation in this process. And the additional information today only adds to that issue. So let's go on to the issues. The big issue here besides that is goal 12 and transportation rule, in that this assistant traffic engineer says that this is insignificant impact. And we believe, based on the analysis we provided, that it is a significant impact. 500 and cap and the issue of the 2,200 trips per day is a major impact in that area. We believe maybe with an RM1 designation and a trip cap at 300 units or 324 hours is something to consider. But the issue is that the decision by the staff was there was no significant impact. We specifically asked that there be a numerical value, in that what is the difference between significant and insignificant in this area? This is just a word. It is not brought back so that the Planning Commission has sufficient information to make an informed decision. And we believe that this current intersection and the one down at Wallace Road need to be considered, and they were not. In that the applicant originally applied for this as an RA at 5 units per acre. They came in with an RM2 requirement at 28 units per acre. The difference between 5 units and 28 units is a 460% increase in traffic at this intersection. And given the trip cap, that's a 250% increase. That is a significant increase in traffic that currently is not mitigated. And this basically is insufficient evidence because Goal 12, according to the staff report, has to demonstrate that the proposed comprehensive plan change and zone change will not have a significant impact. Without a numerical value to significant impact, you cannot make an informed decision. The neighborhood association cannot make an informed decision. We asked specifically staff define what was significant and insignificant. Those comments were not addressed. They were not included as part of this report. And we believe that this report does not provide sufficient facts to make a Goal 12 determination by this body. In addition, in that Appendix D, staff said that they went out to ODOT because there are 2 intersections on Wallace Road that are under their concern and response. ODOT did not provide any responses. So there's no ODOT response here in the record at all. In addition, we asked that staff provide the issue of data from the Salem River Crossing Project, the Riverbend Project, and the Congestion Relief Task Force into the record, because we've been advised by council that unless that's in the record, it's not there. All 3 of those studies, the Salem River Crossing, the Riverbend Project was done 3 or 4 years ago, and the Congestion Relief Task Force said that these intersections at Wallace Road are at or exceed capacity. That means under rule, any additional traffic has to be mitigated. And it is our position that there's not enough evidence to say that this traffic impact cap of 500 is sufficient to meet that requirement. And without ODOT's statements on that, you are robbed of any information to make this decision. Any decision you make in this area is open to challenge because there's insufficient evidence to answer it. ODOT is silent. The staff report is silent on what the significant number is. And so in summary, we find that there's missing analysis, there's no objective criteria. This 300 to 450% increase is a significant impact to the neighborhood. We provided a detailed traffic analysis that showed the false assumptions, the area where there was some misleading information in the traffic report, and that was not addressed by staff. That was absent. All of that information we provided and took the time to prevent was not addressed. It was ignored. And no ODOT analysis. And so reasonably, we believe there's not evidence here to support the insignificant decision that this current trip cap is not adequate to protect the traffic congestion and meet the Goal 12 issues. And we believe that maybe an RM designation should be looked at seriously. We support that as a neighborhood. We support multifamily, and we believe that's a more reasonable decision. We initially asked that this be rejected because of the RM2 designation. We would leave it to the commission to consider RM1. And then in the last time we testified, some members of the commission commented as to the technicality and the expertise of us in the neighborhood to comment. We have our traffic engineer who is a traffic employee and has expertise. I have over 40 years of experience in the field and believe we have provided detailed, reasonable comments to show that there are 5 SRC criteria that are not met. There are 4 policy areas in the comprehensive plan that are not met. And we provided sufficient analysis of traffic and took the applicant's traffic report and provided using their data to show that this is a significant impact. And in addition, the Riverbend and the Salem River Crossing and the Congestion Relief Task Force by the city of Salem said, and it's in their records, that intersections on Wallace Road do not meet capacity, volume to capacity. The city engineers have stated that that's the case. And therefore, any additional increase from this development down there is significant. It has to be mitigated. And we don't believe the proposed trip cap is sufficient mitigation. So we would ask the commission to keep the record open so we can respond to what we did not receive today. We thank Jamie for all of her hard work, but we have not received this one. She's been very helpful. And we would ask the commission to keep it open to reject it outright because the trip cap is insufficient and there's not been evidence in the report to support that. And if you're not, that you consider an RM1 requirement, that would be something we would think would be a good compromise as a neighborhood, adding this development, in that they originally asked for RM residential. They came back and went to the max, which is a 300 to 450% increase in traffic. And we don't have evidence to say that that's not significant. So I will leave it at that. So the neighborhood association is important, it's a support of the project, but not at RM2, okay?
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. And we've made note that you've have a request to keep that record open that we'll address in a little bit. Any
Thank you.
Questions? You bet. Questions for Mr. Anderson? Okay, thank you. Oh, Commissioner Levine.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson, you made a reference that you submitted your own traffic study and that a member on the neighborhood association is a employee at a traffic firm. Did you
at an agency? I'm trying to remember if it's federal or state. So Nick is going to testify. Nick Forte will testify tonight. You can ask him his credentials, but what we did is our analysis took the applicant's information and we showed in that analysis where some assumptions were false and some of the data was contradictory, where they said, for example, there would be an increase in traffic, but and some other information didn't flow from that analysis. And we outlined that for the city engineer to look at and say, this information is contradictory to what was said based on the data, and asked the staff to review that. But staff submitted their report on the 13th before they received our comments, and they did not review it. And we see that to be a major procedural error in this process, is that we commented, they didn't review it.
Okay, I guess my question is more about the Nick's credentials. Is he an engineer? And do you have an engineer's stamp on your traffic study?
It's not a traffic study in terms of the TIA level of detail. There's not an engineer stamp on it, but it's an analysis of the data put forth to staff to review under their credentials, which was not reviewed.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying that. I would encourage in the future that terminology is very important, and I feel that if we went back and looked at your presentation, you flirted with the line about whether or not you implied that you provided your own traffic study. So it would be prudent to identify that you did a review of the study that was submitted and provided comment too.
Your concerns is gratefully accepted, and we appreciate that. And we will try to do better in terms of our diction. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Thank you. Did you have another follow-up, Commissioner Levine, or are you good?
No follow-up.
Okay. Other questions for Mr. Anderson? Thank you, Mr. Anderson, for your time.
Thank you, Councilor Grigg.
You betcha. Okay, we're moving on to those that have signed up to testify. The first on the list, you each have 5 minutes. And again, we would love for you to give us your name and address for the record. First up is Christy Dahlke. Welcome.
Hi, members of the commission. Thank you for the time today. My name is Christy Dahlke. My address is 2090 Landegar Drive, Northwest. I am the property owner of the diamond-shaped lot in the center of the proposed rezoning. That area that was called out is not part of being rezoned. As the closest and most immediately impacted by the proposal, we are here tonight to express our strong opposition, not only to the staff report findings, but also to the plans to rezone this property from residential agriculture to RM2. We think not only will it have an impact on our own privacy, solar access, traffic, and environmental conditions for ourselves and our adjacent neighbors, but it also I don't know if you've seen the property. It's a very rugged area. We have tons of wildlife out here, cougars and deer and coyotes, a pond, wetlands, and it's simply not suitable for the density that an RM2 would provide. We do, as Mr. Anderson indicated, in the neighborhood, we do welcome homes being built that match the existing layout of the current neighborhood, but more importantly, provide an opportunity for new homeowners to join our amazing community. However, the RM2 classification proposed is not suitable to the surrounding neighborhood. And not only would it devalue the current property that is in this area, but it doesn't provide that path to affordable home ownership for the next generation that wants to make West Salem their home. As indicated by the staff report, the surrounding properties in every direction are zoned residential agriculture. And even with the conditions of capping it to the 500 units, I'm very, like you, Commissioner Griggs, I don't understand why RM2 rather than RM1 is being considered. If keeping with the residential agriculture status is not being considered, it seems that an RM1 and the less density it would bring would be more mindful planning. Aligning to the existing neighborhood and working within the capacity of the current infrastructure constraints, allowing for a reasonable compromise between the city and the existing community. Even with limiting to 500 units, it would make a complex of this size one of the largest in Salem. Given that there's a 300 unit apartment complex just down the road, and it's often advertising vacancies, it's less than a mile away, an RM2 classification would only exacerbate an already extremely dense area, causing more congestion by schools and on roadways. If you've ever been near the high school, when classes are starting and stopping, our kids are already playing Frogger to get across the road to the high school, and this is only going to exacerbate this. Another apartment complex is not guaranteed to create more affordability in housing. When Bonaventure came to the West Salem Neighborhood Association back in June, they promised that these would be upscale apartments with granite countertops, luxury accommodations, and that does not sound like it meets the goal of affordability that Salem has. It especially does not provide for neighbors that dream of owning their own home. However, I think with some deliberate and intentional planning on the part of the city, an RM classification would not only help us meet our goal for affordable housing, but also serve the community by providing a path to ownership with townhomes, cottage clusters, and expanding housing choices, of which there are few options today, rather than apartments, of which West Salem already has many. Providing a project that the community could be proud of in terms of design, function, and fit with our existing character and current infrastructure limitations. So we do ask as a neighborhood that you vote against approving the zoning of RM2. Rather, consider keeping the RA designation and providing to this already existing neighborhood, or consider an RM1, limiting the density and keeping the feedback of the current residents in mind. Please do not allow this area to be rezoned. If it's rezoned, we have no recourse in the future. There will always be a developer who wants to put in the maximum amount of units that they can, that an RM2 will allow. And that would forever change the character of this neighborhood and our community. I would much rather urge the council to partner with the current residents and find a resolution that meets everyone's needs in developing this area. So I stress again, we want to see it developed. We want to work in partnership with the developer. We are just asking that there be a compromise and we not have this density in this limited, rugged area. Thank you for your time tonight.
You betcha. And you timed that very well. Questions for Ms. Dalkey? Raising your hand. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. Thank you for your time, Ms. Dalkey. Next up is Mr. Felton, Aaron Felton. And again, name and address for the record, and you have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Just a little bit. Thank you, President Griggs and members of the Planning Commission. It is a real pleasure to be here tonight with my neighbors. My name is Aaron Felton. My wife and I live at 1985 Landegard Drive Northwest. I'm here tonight with my neighbors, my neighborhood association, and community partners who have an invested interest in the livability of our city. We come tonight in the spirit of both compromise and a solution-based approach. You know, it would be easy to take a hard position against any development whatsoever, but that is not our stance. We want to be partners with the city and the developer in creating housing and home ownership opportunities that are truly compatible with the vicinity's development pattern. We are looking to support development that does not make the traffic, congestion, and other infrastructure problems that already challenge this part of West Salem even worse or untenable. In sum, I am opposed to the application and urge the commission to deny it in its present form. Both the applicant and the staff report cite the 2015 housing needs analysis to support the finding that the applicant has satisfied the criteria for a quasi-judicial zone change set forth in SRC 265.005, paragraph E1A, 2 and 3. The 2015 statistic that Salem has a, quote, deficit of 2,897 dwelling units, unquote, in the multifamily capacity has been cited throughout both documents. However, there's absolutely no analysis presented which demonstrates that in 2022, Salem still has such an outstanding deficit. In fact, since 2015, several multifamily projects have been built in Salem, including the 300+ unit Acero complex here in West Salem that my neighbor Christy Dalkey just referred to less than a mile away from us. Consequently, granting the application for a zone change to RM2 as opposed to RM1 with its lower density limits is both arbitrary and without foundation, especially given that the RM1 designation will still meet the objectives which are outlined on page 19 of the staff report. And I quote, that would allow for future multifamily development, which will help to meet the changing needs of the Salem urban area. And I guess I would just, I'm going to conclude by agreeing again with Christy Dalkey, who just spoke. To allow the designation of an RM2 would allow probably the largest multifamily designation structure to be built in West Salem. It would forever change the landscape of our neighborhood. We urge the commission tonight to deny the application or modify it to a residential, to an RM1. It's much more consistent with the neighborhood as it presently is. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak in front of the commission, and I take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Felton. Questions for Mr. Felton? And I have one. I know you're a very engaged person, Mr. Felton, knowing you from my background with you.
Yes.
Did you by chance participate in any of the Our Salem outreach work groups on when they were having that discussion about zoning that potentially as an RM2 area?
I did not participate in those conversations. I reviewed it and saw that this was designated as an RM2. And I regret not raising these same concerns when that was designated as RM2. But I would definitely invite people who are involved in those conversations. And I would invite the commission tonight, come on out to our neighborhood. Take a look at the streets which are being proposed to be mitigated with the traffic. Look at Landegard. Look at how it fronts the high school and think about that much traffic. I know that it's a distinction tonight that we're not talking about the type of development in terms of what type of structure that might be built and that sort of thing. But I also know that once this commission begins this process tonight, it's very hard to go back if this application is approved at the RM2 level. So I think you have to consider what structure may be ultimately built here.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from the commissioners for Mr. Felton? Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Next up, we've got Mr. Easterly. You know the drill, Mr. Easterly. You've got 5 minutes. Name and address, please.
Thank you, President Griggs, members of the Planning Commission. I'm E.M. Easterly, Ward 8. My testimony this evening is complex, and therefore I request that this hearing be continued for 7 days and that the record be held open for testifiers to provide written evidence challenging the applicant's testimony and to expand upon my oral testimony this evening. My first topic, I challenge both the numerical values and the conclusions offered in the TIA the applicant submitted to the city. Mr. Martin received an initial list of queries and concerns regarding the TIA. I have another written list of TIA numerical nonsense that I will submit directly to the Planning Commission. Topic 2, the Planning Department staff has submitted flawed findings with respect to SRC 532.015. No NCMU master plan has been proposed or approved for 2100 Dokes Ferry Road Northwest. No core area has been master planned for the NCMU zoned area. And the area of the property, and without a master plan, there is no outside the core area to modify to a RM2 zone. Topic 3, Planning Department staff finds that the NCMU is not a commercial use area. That is an incorrect conclusion because economic and employment uses are fundamental elements of the NCMU zone. Removing acreage from an already waterway and riparian corridor restricted parcel is contrary to SRC 265.005. Topic 4, the staff report claims that the proposed RM2 acreage is approximately 24.8, yet the applicant states that the RM2 request is for less than 23 acres. Until staff and applicant present clear and coherent acreages to be rezoned, I ask that the Planning Commission to defer action on this application. I thank you for your service, all members of the Planning Commission, and for your careful consideration of my testimony. I welcome questions.
Thank you, Mr. Easterly. Questions for Mr. Easterly? And just clarification, you two are in agreement that the record should be kept open. Is that your request?
Yes, it is a specific and concrete request.
Thank you. Questions from commissioners? Seeing none. Thank you for your time, Mr. Easterly. Next, we have Mr. Scheis. Hope I pronounced that correctly. Close? Was I close?
Commissioner, you did pretty well. It's Scheis.
Gosh darn it.
That's okay.
5 minutes.
My dad from Switzerland. I won't take 5 minutes. I want to thank the commissioner and the staff, and I want to thank everybody in West Salem, part of the neighborhood, and the West Salem Association for commenting tonight. I think it was all very good commentary, and it's interesting for me that everybody in West Salem is against this and how the staff can improve it. I've written a letter, so I'm not going to reread the letter, but I would. It's when everybody's against something, maybe there's something wrong here. And if you have a traffic impact analysis from Bend, and you have a developer from South Salem, and you actually don't really feel what's going on here and how dangerous it is and everything that's associated with the livability, it's pretty easy to make. It basically comes down to semantics. So, and Lisa, I'm going to answer your question. I've been here. I'm sorry, Jane. I'm at Jim Scheis, 1995 Landegard.
Thank you.
And I've been on Landegard for 23 years, and in West Salem for 57 years. So as part of this property, there is a pond and a creek that is part of the Glen Gibson Creek Basin. And so when my kids were young, we used to go down there and fish. And this property has fortunately stayed a lot like it is currently. And that was always in interest of the previous owners. And so what the question I have, and I don't know if I can ask Joe, but if he did a traffic, either traffic impact study or a TPR on Landegard and how many trips Landegard gets currently.
Well,
I'll
this is just time for you to
okay,
make a
well then,
presentation, not to ask
so
questions.
he's probably not going to ask me that question. So, but that would be, I think right now in my best estimate would be, there's probably 100 trips up Landegard right now, and it's still very congested. With what they have proposed, there could be over 2,000 trips up Landegard. It's not a street; it's listed as a collector street as per the TPR, but that would be similar to High Street or Fairview Industrial. This is a farm road. It's not built towards any city standard. It was built to access the farm. It was built by the neighborhoods in the original development in the 1970s. All homes here are basically have 15,000 to 20,000 square foot lots. And I fully believe that should be the continuation throughout the neighborhood. I don't think that RM1 zone is a good idea. I think it should be totally denied. I don't think that this area can support it. And it's a beautiful piece of property. And I think that this would be a fantastic neighborhood to continue as it's currently zoned. And I'm open for questions, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shees. Any questions from commissioners? For Mr. Shees? Seeing none, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. We'll move on to Ms. Williams, Sarah Williams. You have 5 minutes. Name and address for the record, please.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Williams. I live at 2005 Landegard Drive. My husband and I bought the house on Landegard last June. We've lived in West Salem since 2015 and have watched this area grow by adding housing developments and massive apartment complexes all throughout West Salem. What drew us to Landegard last year was the environment of this street. My husband's a teacher at the high school, and our boys go to Chapman Hill Elementary and West Salem High School. My husband and boys walk to and from school every day. So traffic and safety of school-age kids and other pedestrians is a major concern for me. Traffic problems are already in existence in the mornings and afternoons when school's beginning and ending. There are actually 5 schools within about a half mile of here: West Salem High School, Straub Middle School, Calapooya Elementary, Chapman Hill Elementary, and Brush College Elementary. The entrance to Landegard is routinely blocked by traffic turning into the high school. There are times that it is nearly impossible to even turn left out of Landegard. Instead, you turn right, detour through other neighborhoods. While the traffic may be lighter on average, the local neighborhood traffic will disproportionately surge during morning and afternoon hours. The traffic surge during morning hours will also negatively impact safety for children, since students walk to school or ride their bikes in the mornings and home in the afternoon. My oldest son is a sophomore in high school. In the mornings, he has to wait for quite a while to even cross the street. The afternoon is even worse. He has to dodge between cars to get to the street and was almost hit by a car earlier this year because of the backup into the high school. This is the scenario now. What this rezoning will do is vastly overload the already overburdened traffic ecosystem that currently exists. Another major concern for us is the effect the rezoning will have on the schools within West Salem. Schools are already reported to be either close to capacity or over capacity. If the city approves the rezoning, it will just exacerbate the situation. My husband teaches chemistry. The National Science Teachers Association for class safety is 24 students, yet my husband's classes are always over capacity. Some have nearly 40 students in them. Some of his classes, he has more students than actual lab benches to teach. Please understand, we're not against developing the property around Landegard. Quite the contrary. There is a shortage of single-family dwellings in Salem. The property around Landegard is currently zoned for single-family homes. When we moved into our home, we knew that the property around us would be developed, and we welcomed that idea. Other homes would allow families the opportunity to own their home and enjoy the environment that is around us. With the shortage of single-family homes currently available, the price of existing homes is skyrocketing, which means that many adults and families won't have the ability to purchase a home and live in this community as a homeowner. I pose this question to you tonight. Is there a way to accomplish the goal of affordable housing in West Salem without continuing to overburden the infrastructure by putting an unduly strain on traffic, schools, and our children's safety? I believe there is. Allow the land around us to be developed as it was originally intended, allow single-family homes to be developed, allow people and families to have the ability to pursue the American dream and purchase a home. Apartments will never achieve these goals. I'm asking that you not allow the rezoning of the property, as it will undoubtedly add overcrowding in schools, major traffic concerns, and most importantly, put the safety of our children and pedestrians at risk. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my statement tonight. If there's any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Questions for Ms. Williams? Okay, thank you for your time. We have 3 more signed up to testify, unless Shelby lets me know that there are more. Next is Carolyn Jones. Name and address for the record, and you have 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is Carolyn Jones. I live at 2000 Landegard Drive. I am the last house on the northeast corner of Landegard. So 2 sections of my property are just rural land right now. When we first met with Bonaventure last fall regarding this development, well, actually, originally it was supposed to be single family houses, which, you know, losing all of this beautiful farmland is kind of a tragedy anyway. But at least with single family homes, we have the opportunity to have families move in, neighbors move in, you get to know them. They become part of the community, which we have a very tight-knit, wonderful community of neighbors. We all look out for each other, we help each other. But then when they came back to say that they wanted to put in multi-family apartments, 3-story apartments, 3 or 4-story, they didn't designate that. It became more of a situation where we have transient population coming in. So people moving in, moving out all the time. It's not, they did not want to do a gated community like Acero has, which is already a huge apartment development. So it's going to be through traffic all the time. Right now, when I leave to, as Sarah had said, when I leave to go downtown at the time that school is getting out, I invariably have to turn left and go up to Titan Drive to go down Glen Creek, because there are cars that are parked along the bike path on Orchard Heights trying to get into the school to pick up their children. There are kids trying to cross the street, having to wait for traffic to go. It is a total just roadblock of cars. You can't move. I've lived in West Salem since 1971. So for over 50 years, I've seen how West Salem has grown from a rural, smaller community to exponentially developed land at an extremely fast pace. I just don't think that in this community where we are at now, that multifamily units is compatible with what we have. And like all of my neighbors have said, we are not against development of this land. It's a beautiful, a wonderful place to live. But to have the opportunity for people, for families to move into some type of affordable housing on, you know, a nice acre lot. When they were going to do housing here originally, Bonaventure, I would have had on my half-acre lot, bordering 2 sides of my house, I would have had 5 homes, which is a lot, but that would be more compatible with what I would want than having 3-story apartments 30 feet from my property line. I just think the traffic, like when I was talking with my neighbor Jim, who just testified, he had mentioned that West Salem is like an island, and we are dependent upon the bridge to get to employment, to get to shopping, to get to our doctors, our dentist, to go to restaurants, to see a movie. You have to be able to get over the bridge. And right now, during rush hour traffic, that sometimes takes a while. Or if there's an accident, or if there's somebody who's wanting to jump off the bridge, it closes the whole bridge down. So I don't think that you can really allow much more major development of multi-unit apartments without having a third bridge. That's just something that I think we need to look at. West Salem has grown so fast that it's hard to imagine putting that much more traffic. And like Sarah said, or maybe it was Christy, once you allow that zone change to RM2, they may say they're only going to put 500 units, but somebody down the road is going to take all of that property and just stack on as many units as they possibly can. I mean, that is what a developer wants to do. They want to make as much money as they can. I just think that single family homes or duplexes, you know, something like that would be far more suitable to our area and what we're trying to preserve in this area. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Questions for Ms. Jones? Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
You betcha. Okay, now I already killed one name, Mr. Chesbro, and I know you're the stern wheeler. I just never know how to pronounce your name. So could you correct me and then state your name and address for the record with 5 minutes?
I sure can. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I am the captain of the stern wheeler. Thank you for mentioning that. And we do reside right at the corner of Orchard Heights and Dokes Ferry. So we are, our actual address is 2277 Orchard Heights.
How do I pronounce your last name?
Chesbro.
Chesbro. So I was close. Got it.
Just call me captain. That's close enough.
Okay, thank you.
My wife and I, along with my wife's brother, Bruce Brownstein, and our next door neighbor, all live on the same property. So there's 4 adults. We are all seniors. I just celebrated my 81st birthday, and my next door neighbor's 84. And we love this property. We've been living there for 22 years. But our main concern is the intersection of Dokes Ferry and Orchard Heights. And as much as I appreciated all the other considerations, my main concern is the safety of that intersection. Being a Coast Guard captain, safety is always drummed into us constantly. That is keeping our passengers safe. And I see this intersection as being probably one of the most unsafe intersections in the entire city. I just received a report from the police department. They would only go back 17 years. I asked them for a full report of accidents at this intersection. But even going back just 17 years, we've had over 41 that have been serious accidents at the intersection. One of them involved my own daughter, who was T-boned by a hit-and-run driver at the intersection. We've had 1 fatality, and I was told that there was another fatality prior to that. I actually had a police officer tell me one time that until we have 3 fatalities at the intersection, the city and ODOT really can't do anything to try to make it a safer intersection. But I feel this should be an important consideration for any development of further, that would impact further traffic impact. The biggest problem with the design of this intersection is the ski jump slope that comes from when you're coming east down Orchard Heights Road. The kids get a thrill out of jumping that ski jump slope right at Dokes Ferry. And that has caused the majority of the serious accidents. 3 times now, the bus shelter has been totally destroyed, including one that just happened here just a couple of weeks back, which was not even in that report. By the way, I did send a copy to Jamie of that police report, by the way, of all the accidents. The city has told me that to redesign the intersection and to get rid of that slope is not that big of a deal. It can be done, but it just hasn't been approached. And nothing's happened in spite of all my requests. and I've witnessed a number of these accidents, by the way. One of them that I couldn't believe, I heard the crash. I went out my front yard, and there was a lady sitting on the sidewalk there next to her car, and she said the kids were coming so fast down by the high school that when they hit that ski jump, they completely sailed right over the top of her car. She was at the intersection and then crashed, behind her, and that was one of them that took out one of the bus, the bus shelter. The police have told me that they get up to speeds of over 80 miles an hour coming down that hill just for the thrill of jumping the ski jump. Well, we are not Hoodoo or Mount Bachelor or anything like that. We don't need a ski jump right here at an intersection of an important intersection like this. I've been seeing more and more kids walking to school. And because of the close proximity of the elementary, middle school right next door to us and the West Salem High School across the street, I only see more and more kids every single day. And I'm just horrified that somebody's going to get killed at this intersection. I just lost a granddaughter this past week. And, you shouldn't have to, not because of an automobile accident, but because it was a homicide. But you shouldn't have to see kids die unnecessarily.
Thank you, Mr. Chesbro. Your time is up if you want to conclude with maybe one or two lines, and then we have a question for you right off the bat from
Okay. I agree with the development of some sort. I like the idea of an RM1 instead of an RM2. But I really think that part of any developer's plan should involve doing something about that intersection.
Okay, thank you.
Cameras, whatever.
Appreciate that. Commissioner Slater, you have your hand raised.
I do. I don't have a question, Mr. Chesbro, but I'm very sorry to hear about your granddaughter. That sounds like a horrific experience for you and your family. I just wanted to make you aware and your neighbors aware that the city is going to be going through a bond process, and that bond process is going to identify potential street improvements. So it sounds like your concerns about Orchard Height and Dokes Ferry is something that may want you to pay attention to that bond process and be an advocate in your community for addressing that issue. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions for Mr. Chesbro? I think we are good with that. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Forte, you are up next, and you too have 7 minutes. Name and address.
Okay, hi, I'm sorry. I'm Nick Forte. I reside at 2165 Turney Street Northwest here in West Salem. So I'll just start out, dear planning commissioners, thanks for the opportunity to testify here tonight. As you know, our land use chair is here as the official representative of the Neighborhood Association, but I just wanted to offer a few comments to further those that we already provide as a neighborhood association that are already in the written record. My comments are primarily on the traffic analysis and more particularly the process and assumptions used in the report and the review. And the first question has to do with the development of the traffic counts. Some of those at least came from the Salem River Crossing Technical Report of 2016. So we haven't seen that actual report or what the kind of underlying assumptions were in there. So these things just give us pause. I'm not saying kind of good, bad, or indifferent, but I think we just need some more detail about what the assumptions are inherent in that report. And I guess it leads us to question the regional traffic model might be appropriate, obviously, for doing regional travel projections, something like a large scale project like the Salem River Crossing. But here, when we're talking about a more focused analysis on those few intersections in West Salem, it seems like just drawing on that would be more appropriate. The second question has to do with the planning horizon for the city and state highway intersections, because those seem to be relatively short. Again, maybe that's something that can be explained. I think we're just looking for kind of further conversation on that. And the third question has to do with mitigations. And in particular, I know it's been brought up before, the Neighborhood Association has, for obvious reasons, a lot of concerns with Wallace Road. And the report notes there are limited minor approaches that can be considered for Wallace Road. So our issue here is not so much for the TIA, but for the implications inherent in that report. And our understanding is that the Wallace Road study, the circulation study, was only presented for city council information. And there was no decision rendered on any of those recommendations inherent in and included in that report. So we think the mitigations are not necessarily foreclosed, and that even if they are, I think this just reiterates for us the importance of getting a council decision on that study, and then maybe looking at other mitigation options, because we really think that obviously that's the primary arterial getting in and out of West Salem, going over the bridges. We think we just need to continue to keep that as at the forefront. And then finally, we've got questions, as I think the other folks have talked to on this, about the de minimis volume to capacity changes. And again, that's just a further explanation about what happens, because obviously some of those queue lengths associated with that level of service, once you get into that lower level of service range, are really quite substantial, as you can see from the report and the analysis provided. So I guess in conclusion, we would like you to keep the record open and defer action until we've got a resolution on the comments. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mr. Forty, your comments have echoed many of the others that have come before you. And just as a reminder that, you know, a lot of the mitigation strategies are developed during that site plan review. So this is strictly a zone change. And I know there's anticipation about what that means. I get that. But that is a conversation that happens further down the road if the zone change is approved. Questions for Mr. Forty? Okay, not seeing any, and I believe that's the end. Thank you very much for your time. I believe that is the end of our testimony. Questions of staff before I go to applicant rebuttal. Commissioner Slater, I see your hands raised.
Thank you. I will be the first to admit that I am not particularly well versed at interpreting traffic studies. I've invested some of my time in other areas of the planning code, but traffic studies are a little confusing to me. So I have a few questions, and I hope you'll bear with me. So I guess I would direct this to, well, whoever would answer the question. Can I get a, we have a traffic statement here that says that there's very little impact on the traffic infrastructure in West Salem. I'm hearing very conflicting things about that. So can I get a staff person to walk me through what is happening on the 3 intersections that are in play in this development? Like what are the actual anticipated impacts?
Tony,
I'm sorry, that was very open-ended. I'm looking for help here.
Good evening, Planning Commission. I'm Tony Martin. I'm the Assistant City Traffic Engineer. For background, I've been with the city 17 years doing development review and working in development services. Prior to that, I was 12 and a half years with ODOT, doing development review and access management. So I've been doing transportation planning rule things for a long time. So the way it works is if you're requesting a comprehensive plan change and a zone change, you look at the reasonable worst case in the existing zoning, which in this case is single family residential. You apply that to a future year, which is your TSP, the city's TSP horizon year, not necessarily the most advanced model year, but we have to focus on our TSP. So we project the traffic out to the TSP horizon year, and we apply the traffic that could be generated under the existing zoning. So then they're proposing a zone change. So we then look at that same horizon year, and then we add the additional traffic on top of it and do an analysis. And then there's some criteria in the OAR 660 06012, which is the transportation planning rule. So if the intersection is operating below the volume to capacity ratio for the local jurisdiction in the horizon year, and the change, the upzone, the increase in traffic doesn't make it go over that limit, then it's not in effect, because you're allowed to develop whatever's going on until you reach that maximum capacity. So the intersections in the city are freebies, because in the whatever the future your horizon is, it doesn't exceed our volume to capacity standard. On the state highway, it's slightly different, but the analysis is you do the same analysis, but when we look at the state highway, the analysis will show that under the existing zoning it's already over capacity. So when it's over capacity, the rules change a little bit. What it says is that if you're over capacity and you make it worse, you have to mitigate it back to where it was before you came in. The exception is on state highways, they have in the Oregon Highway Plan, they have a caveat that says you can make it worse, but up to 0.03 change in the volume to capacity ratio. And that's what the trip cap does, is it keeps it at the 0.03 or below. So by ODOT standard, it is not a significant effect.
And this is for which road, which intersection?
Well, it acts for state highways, which is Wallace Road. Wallace Road.
Wallace,
State
that's
highway.
what okay.
Wallace Road is state highway, sorry.
Okay. All right. And then Dokes Ferry?
Dokes Ferry is ours, City of Salem.
So in both these cases, the impact, if this were approved with the trip cap, the impact would be that there would be an effect no greater than that 0.03.
On the state highway, yes.
On the state. And the impact on Dokes Ferry Road would be?
It's not significant because it doesn't take it above our maximum threshold.
That currently exists in that
would currently
infrastructure,
exist,
currently
yes.
capacity. Okay.
Because
that was very helpful. Thank you for interpreting.
Existing intersections are operating below capacity.
Gotcha. Okay. And I'm assuming that the neighborhood association is disagreeing with this assessment.
Yes.
Gotcha. Thank you. That's all for now, but it was very helpful.
Thank you, Commissioner Slater. So, Tony, I had a question. I know that Mr. Shees was wanting to know, he couldn't really ask you at the time, but I'm asking for him if there was any analysis on Landegard, and I believe the answer is no, because you were looking at the major intersections, correct?
Correct. Landegard, I mean, it's shown as a collector that goes through, and I will share, maybe I shouldn't share, but over the many years that we've been looking at this property for development, back when it was called the Bone property, and we were doing the mixed use, we were looking at alternatives to realign the collector out to Dokes Ferry, because we acknowledge that that Landegard is very substandard, and it would be very expensive to bring it up to current standards, both structurally, putting in sidewalks, streetlights, water, sewer, all those things that would need to go on. Now, those things need to go on, but we can look at keeping it as a very minor road. We would make a connection to the new alignment, which would give those residents opportunity to get out to Dokes Ferry or some other street without having to wait for traffic to turn left onto Orchard Heights.
Okay. And that would be part of the mitigation strategies, right?
It very well could be.
Okay.
But that would be a site plan review, not comp plan change, zone change.
Right. Yeah, I know it's a premature conversation. I feel for the neighbors. I mean, I would be as anxious as they are, but it is anticipating a conversation that has to be held during that site plan review. Other questions of staff before we, Commissioner Kopcho.
Thank you, President Griggs. We had a lot of conversation from folks who testified around being amenable to a different zone, RM1. I'm always one who wants to put mixed use everywhere, but can staff help clarify for us on the record the ability for such a change to take place during this hearing?
So Olivia Diaz, current planning manager. So before you and the Planning Commission is reviewing is a proposal of RM2. So you have the ability to approve or deny RM2. The applicant hasn't proposed RM1. And this comes up every once in a while on Planning Commission that I've been at, right, where there's a concern to go down zone. but that's not the proposal. So before you, the applicant is requesting RM1. That's what's before you. If you don't think it meets the decision criteria, you could deny the application. If you think it meets the decision criteria, you would approve the application with conditions. But we can't substitute zones similar to, the previous case. We can't change it to mixed use. You can't substitute zones. It's what the applicant is proposing.
Follow up, Commissioner Copto, or are you good?
Nope, I just appreciate Olivia's clarity for everybody. Thanks.
Yeah. Other questions of staff? Commissioner Slater.
Thank you. I'd like to just follow up on Commissioner Copto's question and ask then if we could reduce the trip frequency, or we could reduce the amount of permitted units to a lower amount as a condition.
Olivia, do you want to take that, or Ms. Donaldson, do you want to take that?
Look, Lisa popped on.
Oh,
I would
yay,
say
Lisa.
that the trip cap is already limiting the units, but Lisa can talk about an extra condition if she wants.
Yeah, I was just going to say that there'd have to be some basis for that, right? And so like Olivia said, the trip cap is limiting the number of units. They're not asking to do the full amount allowed in that zone. And that's based on an approval criterion, the traffic that's going to come from it. And, they have a choice to mitigate those trips, like in our last case, build and mitigate, or do a trip cap and not go over and not trip those mitigations. So I'm not sure what criteria would be related to put another condition to limit units even more.
Okay, so if I can follow up then?
You betcha.
Thank you. So if I were to propose a lower unit number or a cap on the number of units, I would have to articulate some rationale that is, I guess, rational and related to the criteria. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions of staff before we move to applicant rebuttal? Commissioner Goebel, you have some help there, I can see.
I just wanted to see if staff would be amenable to leaving the record open and continuing the discussion on this, just given what we've heard from neighbors and the additional Mr. Bessman's additional comment that we received at like 4:30.
I think Commissioner Levine probably will be making a motion similar to that. Generally, when we have a request to keep the record open, we do that. We give them that opportunity. So, but yeah, we'll see what he comes up with.
You're required to do one or the other. So this is the first hearing on this case. So you either have to continue the hearing or hold the record open. And so we can provide those dates if you want to hold the record open for the 7/7/7. So if you're going to do that, the applicant might, I don't know if they want to rebut now, or they might want to save that for the final written rebuttal. They might want both opportunities. So.
Okay. Let's just check unless we've got other questions of staff before I go to the applicant to see if they'd like to rebut. Okay. Switching it back over to the applicant to see if there's a 5-minute rebuttal period that they would like to use. And if you could state your name so the recording can hear who's talking.
Yeah, good evening. For the record, my name is Alan Sorum. My office is at 250 Church Street, Southeast Salem, Oregon. Zip code 97302. I'm attorney for the applicant. We do have a couple of comments on rebuttal. So just 2 procedural matters. So the applicant understands there's been a request for the record to be left open. This is the first evidentiary hearing, so we recognize that that is a state law that requires that to be occurred. We feel that everybody's been given their opportunity to give oral testimony tonight. And, continuing the hearing isn't really needed because, we've all been given an adequate opportunity to kind of come before you and explain ourselves, ask our questions. So we have no objection to the 7/7/7 period, which staff can kind of describe in detail what that means. But we would prefer for the public hearing portion to be closed tonight. There were some comments kind of under the goal 1 procedural error, asserting skepticism and asserting a right that the individuals submitted materials to staff and it wasn't thoroughly or timely reviewed, and that wasn't somehow a very large procedural error. That's not a procedural error requiring denial or a new hearing or anything like that. Staff did include expressed summaries of many of the comments that were submitted timely in the record material. Those are summarized on pages 6 through 7 on your staff report. Also, those that were directed to the criteria were addressed by staff and their responses of proposed findings. We think those are comprehensive and they do address all the issues. Mr. Martin did a very good job tonight, kind of synthesizing the gist of what are we talking about on traffic and Goal 12. And the real question is, is there a significant impact on the affected jurisdictions? And I think he was even able to speak to, well, yeah, we do have the numbers on that. We go ahead and we take the trip cap and we go ahead and using that enforceable measure, that's an allowed mechanism to ensure compliance with the transportation planning rule. That coupled with other existing funding mechanisms for Dokes Ferry Road and others, there is no significant effect. And that can be challenging to hear when you're driving in West Salem and knowing that we already have significant problems. It seems counterintuitive, but that's what the evidence shows, is that we can change the zoning. And one of the things to keep into mind, how could that be? It's just the underlying zoning does allow a lot of traffic. This is all urban land. This is not land to be maintained for farmland. It's not land to be maintained for wildlife. This is supposed to be developed. And City Council just approved, local changes for middle housing within all urban development. And so your baseline traffic for all DR zoning and everything is going to continue to increase. So the change between going to RM2 and what is allowed under the current zoning isn't nearly as significant as someone might think, because they're trying to make a comparison between an undeveloped property and a fully developed property, but that's not the question before us. On the question of Goal 10, there were some comments that were made by the neighborhood association, and I know we got a lot of new planning commissioners, so I just wanted to direct, there was an update in April to the needed housing analysis report. And I think that was April of last year, kind of saying, we had a buildable land inventory analysis conducted in 2014, showing the number of deficits and giving a summary of, what's happened in the intervening 6 years since that analysis was done. Approximately 40 acres has been rezoned, which has helped, but there's been so much multifamily development. There's been, I believe, the report concluded that 2,935 units were constructed, which is essentially a greater number than the original deficit that was found to be in violation of Goal 10. So we've essentially doubled the need for multifamily land since 2014, because we've only been rezoning approximately 40 acres, which translates to 660 units.
Mr. Sorum, your time is up if you want to wind it up.
The gist of it is there is an absolutely significant need for more multifamily land and to develop it at the greatest extent practicable to complete our obligations under Goal 10. So that's what we have. Thank you.
And just for clarification, so you don't yell at your city councilors, that they approved that middle housing requirement, but that was a state law, the House bill that requires certain size municipalities to provide for that. So questions for Mr. Sorum? Can't believe you're off the hook like that, but
I'll take it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm looking to you, Vice President Levine. We have a request to close the hearing, but keep the record open for that 777 period. I think you might have those dates.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And I will make a motion that we close the public hearing and leave the record open for a period of 7 days until February 1st, 2022. at which time there will be an opportunity for a rebuttal testimony until February 8th of 2022, and then a period of final rebuttal to be submitted by February 15th, 2022.
Great. And then our deliberations will be that night, right? I believe.
I believe so, yes.
So I have a second on that motion. Commissioner Kopcho, stepping right up. Good job. Discussion on that motion. Okay. Shelby, would you please call the roll, signify by saying aye if you're in favor of the motion to close the hearing and keep the record open for the 777. Aye is a yes if you're in favor, no if you're not.
Commissioner Goebel?
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs?
Aye.
Commissioner Heller?
Aye.
Commissioner Kopcho?
Aye.
Commissioner Levine?
Aye.
And Commissioner Slater?
Aye.
And Augustine is absent.
Thank you. Motion passed.
I do just want to clarify, just for the public that's here and people watching on YouTube, that the deadlines for those dates is 5 p.m. on those days to submit the comments.
Of course, they can do it earlier.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's always helpful. Thank you. Thanks, Shelby, for that clarification. So we'll move on to item 6, special orders of business. We have no special orders of business and we don't have information reports. We don't have anybody else signed up under public comment, but we are ready for Lisa for the planning administrator's report.
Great. Just a few items. I think you already said it. Commissioner Griggs, the UDC was approved last night by the City Council unanimously. I sent you all an email with some of the last minute updates through the, I know it's been at council for 4 meetings now, so it's been some iterations. So hopefully if you are interested, you read my email or you check out the staff report. It needs to go back for second reading at their next meeting in February. So those amendments won't be effective until mid-March. Many people have asked me already. The flag report is going to City Council on February 14th. Former Vice President McKinley says he will be attending to speak on behalf of the flag contest and the report that we put together. So
on the state's birthday, that's really good.
That's, yes, he did tell me that too.
Yes,
And I told him that was the date. He thought it was fitting. So, you know, if any of you want to come and testify or watch the meeting, that should be fun. And then I put in my email that we don't have any new commissioners yet, but I have heard that the council's subcommittee is going to be reviewing additional applications next week. And then I believe that they might pick more people from that for interviews and then interview, you know, pick from a full panel of folks that they have interviewed. So hopefully it won't be too much longer, maybe mid to late February before we get our commissioners filled. And that's all I have.
Questions for Lisa? Commissioner Kopcho, you look like you're about to say something.
Look like he was pondering something now.
Yes. I hope former Commissioner Pollock was listening tonight in McKinley, you know, enjoying the pleasure of not sitting on planning commission anymore. So if they are out there, hello. Exactly.
Oh, Shelby is reminding me that February 1st meeting will be canceled. We don't have any items, and since tonight's, oh no, wait, on the 1st, aren't we going to come back with Olivia's case, right, Shelby? That seems like that was hours ago, but that is the next meeting.
Oh,
So not canceled.
You're right. Yeah.
Not
That one
canceled.
just like flew out of my brain as soon as it all happened. So yes.
So that I think will be the only thing that night will just be the consideration of that order that was pushed from tonight, but there shouldn't, there's no other hearing. So
we have a week to review that and decide. Do you think that's enough time? Okay.
I hope so. There's no 120 days for this case. So, you know, you're not on a, under the gun necessarily. So you can always discuss it and then delay it again if you need to. The meeting dates are a little weird in February because of the holiday and City Council gets pushed to a Tuesday. It messes up our meeting dates, just like in January. So
I just can't believe they don't accommodate our schedule.
I know, right? So we're on the 1st and the 15th in February.
Got it. We'll just pay attention to the email when it comes through. Are there any questions for Lisa? Any comments for the good of the order? Commissioner Slater.
Me again. So I have two things. One is we hear a lot about traffic congestion in Salem, West Salem particularly, and it creates, I think, some challenges in how we address and discuss development there. And I'm wondering if it would make sense for the commission to set aside some time to actually learn more or wrestle in greater detail with that issue. Maybe hold a special hearing on that. Maybe there are other kind of tools in our arsenal, weapons in our arsenal that would allow us to get at this a little bit. But I'm kind of increasingly having a difficult time kind of ascertaining how best to vote or what kinds of questions to ask in this particular context. And perhaps it's just me, but if there are others that are interested in that, I would like to talk about how to get at that.
We did that specifically on West Salem with the West Salem Neighborhood Association maybe 4 years ago, before the pandemic and before your time. So you're not the only one that has come up because we do get the same comments every time there's a case in West Salem. So
right.
It's really up to the commission if you want to do that. We had, I think Kevin and Tony came before or somebody from Public Works, Glenn Davis, gave a presentation kind of on like what's TPR analysis, how is that different than like a traffic impact study, when are the different things required, what can you consider and not consider. And then I think there was some discussion of capacity or Wallace Road already being over capacity and what that meant for applications. So we can do that again if the commission likes.
I think that's a good idea. I think Ian and I were part of that earlier review, but we could I could definitely use a refresher. And if we could wait maybe until we get the two new folks on, so we can do that learning curve together, that would be great.
Yep.
I don't think you can hear it too many times, and I hope the public tunes in to hear it also, so they can see what we're making decisions based on, and it's just would be helpful.
Right, and it could just be a matter that we are all agreeing to disagree.
Right.
And maybe that's where we end up with all of this.
Right.
The other thing I wanted to address, and I asked Shelby to send around an article about rooftop solar.
That was great. That was a great article.
So it seems to me that kind of our rooftops, especially big box stores and other things, are an asset that we ought to be using as we look at more climate change strategies. And I was wondering if there is a way that the commission can initiate some policy work or policy review or explore this in a way that is respectful of staff time and all of our other responsibilities, but perhaps that there's a way that we can move forward and explore this idea. And I'm just not kind of sure what avenues there are as a planning commissioner to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the planning commission can decide to discuss policy issues and just determine if you want to, make a motion to initiate something. There's some moving parts. I mean, we have climate rules coming out from the state. The climate action plan has not yet been considered by the city council. And then it's a legislative session as well. And I believe, I don't know if solar panels specifically, but there are other bills that maybe are being proposed. So some of it is like, maybe see where all that lands first, but you can work on any issue you want, but if what you're saying is you want to assign me to work on an issue, then it has to be by motion, and you can only assign me an hour of time. That's the same rules that apply to the city council, unless it's like a case or something.
So I wonder if that's something that because that'd be building codes, right? That would be in there, or wouldn't that be in their sandbox?
Yes.
Can we ask them for more of their time? Can we ask them for 2 hours?
I don't think it would be. The thing with the building code is Salem doesn't have its own building code. So it's state building codes. We apply state building codes. We don't create our own codes.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I do know, I mean, I can talk to Eunice some more because I'm not the one that reviews the legislative bills. I think a bunch of bills dropped yesterday.
Yesterday.
Yeah. I believe the REACH code has come back, which, has to do with building code and making things more sustainable. It didn't get passed before. And so that might be something that's already happening at the state level. So I can ask Eunice for some updates on that and send that as a first step, just to let you know in case maybe something's already happening, because then that maybe pushing for that at the state level would maybe be a way to focus.
I wish we had that article back when we were developing the strategies for the Climate Action Task Force. That would have been a wonderful strategy to add. And I don't know if it's ever too late to add a strategy, but that would be a Eunice question, correct?
Well, for the climate action plan, it was talked about at council last night that at least portions of it are coming forward to the council. The next meeting in February, I can't remember which date, maybe the second meeting in February, for consideration. So it seems like the council is breaking it up into chunks, is my understanding from how it was described at the very beginning, as kind of like an info item that was discussed. So there could be opportunity to suggest more strategies, like you said, Commissioner Griggs, for the council to consider with the climate action plan.
Did you guys read the article? It was really a very fascinating article and a great use of that rooftop space.
I would certainly welcome hearing what other commissioners have to say about this. I typically would pick up the phone and call you, but I'm not allowed to do that. So now I'm doing that here in a public meeting.
Commissioner Kopcho.
I support it. There you go. I support it. And also, Commissioner Slater, I think this is, I'm going to tack something on. I think it's come up in discussion before related to rooftops and surfaces in general, albedo, and higher reflectivity materials, which is something that if we had our own building code that we could have in there, but we don't. But it's certainly something that could be in a similar discussion for rooftops, for pavements, for various flat surfaces.
And adding to that, if it ever is promoted to the discussion level of being part of our strategies, I would encourage it to be of an incentivizing nature, as that's pretty much the tack that we've been taking on the task force, rather than mandating that every rooftop that's greater than 70,000 square feet or whatever has to have solar. And figuring out the incentives, the trade-offs for building that site. What are the trade-offs if I do put solar, and how you incentivize? I think the article, I looked at the one and forget which town it was. It did sound like it was not a mandate, it was an incentive approach. So what do you other thoughts? Commissioner Heller, Commissioner Gopal, just gonna pull it out of you. Okay, well, Commissioner Slater, what are you gonna do?
Well, that's a good question. I'm going to call Lisa, and we'll figure out what I'm allowed to bring forward.
Yeah. It might be conversations with the city council, because it's already out of our hands of the task force. So I think it's that. Let me know if you need any help. Not that I could help. Other comments for the good of the order? Well, with that, I suppose we're seeing you February 1st. And we are adjourned. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Bye.